I also asked my daughter about what I should do to engage with you this afternoon, understanding that I was coming after these two gentlemen at, the sort of early afternoon slots. And so my daughter said, Mummy, just show them a video and tell them a story. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you a video that is going to kind of set up what it takes to unlock value in the intelligence age. And then I'm going to tell you a story of what we've learned through the, kind of over 2,000 projects that we're doing with clients around unlocking value through artificial intelligence and agentic, in the hope that some of this might serve some of your conversation as you go back to your organizations and put some of this in practice. And so hoping that the teenager spirit still lives within you and that you're going to have a little bit of video interaction, I'll go ahead and show it. We live in interesting times, and a lot of the conversation today has been centered around how do we unlock the value of technology? How do we think about the possibilities that some of these generative AI and agentic are bringing into the world? My sense is that a lot of our conversation is centered around tech, but the actual key to unlocking value is thinking about how will we harness it? What is it going to take to weave some of this technology into a processes in a way that it is amplifying human capability, not replacing it. My sense is that a lot of you believe in the transformative power of AI, but I'm not so sure that we're making as much progress as the promise of technology delivers. And so what I'd like to do in the context of this afternoon is explore a little bit about, how do we feel this can work? What are the things that we are learning in the context of the work that we do? And what are some of the gaps that we are thinking need to be closed in order for this to be as transformative I was hoping it will be? When I say that the intelligent age is actually right people, it's because we feel that technology alone will not be sufficient. If I think back in history, the massive or the major changes where we have been able to deliver value are taking place where humans embrace that technology. And so if I go back to the sporting analogy that we have been listening to a little bit earlier this morning, I think that the video replay capability is really interesting and is necessary, but it will only deliver value when the team around it kind of understand how to use it and are engaged enough to change the behaviors that deliver the new outcomes that are necessary. And so, the promise of technology is great. Our experience tells us that, we need to be investing about 3 times the value that we invest in technology in human capability. Yet, I'm not sure what the conversations in your organizations is, but that is not always the case. At the same time, we need to be talking about talent and capability. And this isn't just technological talent. This is not just data scientists or programmers. I think the question that we need to be thinking about is what is the creativity, the empathy, the sort of ethical compass that it is necessary in order for us to teach this technology to create outcomes that are aligned with our corporate values and with our corporate policies. And so I think that this requires a much greater set of intentional principles than we currently see in practice. The next piece that I would love to talk about in terms of the human context of this revolution is that, to me, trust is not something that can be delegated to algorithms. I think that, our ethical decisions and how we think about using this technology needs to be guided by our moral compasses. And that is not something that we can leave the machines to think about by themselves, right? So it requires a lot of intentional thinking about how we're going to shape the outcomes that this very promising technology has ahead of us. As we think about the technology, the talent, the trust, I think the other piece that I would touch on is that we need to be clear in terms of how we continue to evolve our mindsets and behaviors in order to embrace this technology. Actually, let me introduce myself. I don't think I have done that. I am, as you can tell, 100% Spanish. I am an economist by training and a management consultant by profession. I have spent longer than I'll admit to in a public setting like this one, kind of working with C-suite of organizations, helping them get their workforces galvanized behind some of their strategic initiatives. And so one of the things that I think is fundamentally important as we think about this is kind of understanding what kind of mindsets and behaviors are necessary in order for us to harness the value of this technology. In the work that I do with Wharton's Professor Ethan Malik, we've started to kind of talk a little bit about the idea that we need to think about agentic not as a technology, but as a teammate. This idea that this is intelligent force that we need to think about as a colleague is actually really helpful. He's just published, and I would invite you to review it, a study that they've done with Procter & Gamble, when they compare the outcomes that individuals by themselves, individuals with agents, teams by themselves, and teams with agents can create. And there's a couple of very interesting insights that we've been able to gain from this work. One is that individuals working with agents outperform teams every single time. In outperforming teams, one of the things that we have observed agents contribute to the individual's performance is the ability to think without silos, something that I think, we've talked about earlier this morning, this idea that an enterprise is a dynamic set of components, not necessarily functional elements that work vertically. And so agents are not biased by our understanding of how machines work, and as a result, help individuals create better outcomes than teams. The other insight that I think is very, very powerful is that individuals are actually reporting greater levels of positive engagements by working with agents than they do by working with other humans. And so I think that this potentially creates incredible opportunities for us to unlock value in ways that we're not thinking about. I don't know how many of you are from Germany. I am based in Germany, and in Germany currently, we have what seems to be an epidemic of organizations pulling people back to work into their office, voluntarily or not. My sense is that by understanding how we use some of this technology, we could actually create models of hybrid working that could be really impactful, both for organizations as well as individuals. I'll just wrap this up by saying that I think we have a set of technologies that require that we think, learn, and lead in different ways. And we are, in my view, we are only at the exploratory stages of what this means. When I kind of think about this, I'd love to invite you into some of the insights that we gather every year for the World Economic Forum. We engage in thousands of interviews with C-suite, with the C-suite of our clients, but also with the workforce. And I've called this the leadership disconnect. So when you talk to executives about how they feel, how they think about the power of artificial intelligence or agentic, everybody says, or 97% of them are going to say that it is transformative and critical for their organizations to drive value in the immediate future. When you ask them about their readiness level, they only 30 of them suggest that they're ready. Now, when we go to the workers, we see that there is a significant disconnect in terms of kind of the level of fear. And I'll use the word because I think it's really important. The narrative that we use around how we think about artificial intelligence or agentic is one that sounds very much like the machine is here to replace the human. Whereas I think, and our experience, the experience that we have in our projects, is that where we are actually able to unlock value is where the machine amplifies the human. But this takes intention. A lot of times, we don't involve our professionals in designing how to deploy artificial intelligence in certain contexts, where we look into the level of experience that the workforce feels they have in terms of their ability to engage with AI. We have very disparate results, as you can see in the graph. And I think the last bit that I will touch on is that there is an incredible disconnect in terms of the individual's belief of their ability to engage with artificial intelligence and agentic, and management trust in that ability. But the thought that I actually think is worth inviting into conversation is that, when we ask individuals, how willing are you to engage with this technology? A lot of times the feedback that we get is that they are willing, but actually distrust their management to create positive outcomes that will benefit all through the use of AI. I would invite you to kind of think about, how do you talk about this in your organizations? What is actually the level of conversation that you're having in terms of how you want to adopt AI? And what are the strategies that you can use in the context of involving others in this conversation? Because as our research show, there's an interesting analogy around kind of AI and the way in which we talk about it versus how much of it is actually happening. 97% of the C-suite are actually interested and believing in transformative. 36% of them are actually saying that they're scaling AI within their organizations, but yet only 13% of them are actually seeing value translate from those initiatives. And so I actually think that, it is really important to invite the why into this conversation. Why is it? Or, in other words, what can we learn from the 13% in terms of how they're deploying AI that can be useful for our organization in terms of the value delivery question? 88% of the companies that are articulating value are actually being human-centric in how they deploy the artificial intelligence and agents. And so I'd like you to kind of reflect on what that means and how we can think about this. And what I will do for the next kind of 4 or 5 minutes is share with you how we frame and what we've learned from the work that we're doing with this organization, so that you have, a couple of ideas to take back home with you to help you think through this question. We are starting to think about this in the context of the workbench and the workforce, right? So anytime that an organization is thinking about adopting a platform like O9 or doing any type of digital or physical change to what they're doing, we think that this has implications for the workforce that are important to consider in order to unlock the value connected with that initiative. I think it's been talked about earlier this morning, and I do want to be kind of a little bit provocative, because we are all kind of very used to reading that only a limited amount of the initiatives, technology transformation initiatives or transformation initiatives, actually deliver the value that they promised. And to me, it's still very surprising that to this date and age, we're not shifting some of the choices that we're making in order to unlock the value. And a lot of the times, the answer is related to, how much we involve the humans into the conversation. I think we all get very excited about the tech, and we have as much tech as we can handle. But a lot of the times, I don't think we are as focused and as indexed on the capability and what it will take to unlock value of this tech. If I can think about this, in terms of what we see organizations doing well, is the orientation around value is really critical as you think about adopting AI or a digital transformation initiative. Platforms, impact processes in a way that is fundamental. We think that the question about embedding responsible principles, particularly in the deployment of AI and agentic, is fundamental to the outcomes, and then measuring those outcomes. And as you do this, the conversation about, what does this mean for how we lead and learn? You saw it in the video earlier, but I think a lot of times, and particularly at times where resilience is fundamental, our leaders don't always embody the changes and the stories that we want to see. Artificial intelligence and agentic is, for the first time, a set of technologies that requires that we as leaders engage with this technology, understand how it works, so that we can deploy it effectively to our workforce. And I'm not sure that we're all as fluent as we can be in the context of this technology. Not only the language of, what do we mean by virtual or artificial intelligence or virtual reality, but also how do we think in terms of how it will impact the value that we deliver to our clients. The conversation that then becomes into focus is, kind of what does our organization look like in a world where we're actually deploying a multitude of agents alongside our workers? Maybe the question that comes to my mind is the CIO of the future the HR for your agents? How do we think about the fluidity of the shape of our organization at a time where we can actually, create a workforce, a digital workforce that works alongside our real workforce overnight? There are very important implications for how we define what our organizations look like that need to be very intentional in terms of how we think about this deployment. I could talk a very long time about the importance of capability. I'll just say that, our organizations are used to consuming talent. We hire people, they spend their life working with us, and then at some point they retire. I think that as we think about redefining value for the intelligent age, we need to think very intentionally about the capability that we're going to need, and accessing and creating capability become fundamental elements that support our value delivery strategy. And we cannot be intentional enough about how we do this and help our kind of workforce unlock their potential for the time that they are with us. And then I think finally, and kind of as a reflection, and this is a piece that it is personal to me because I think is fundamental to value creation, is this idea that we're in a world of perma-shock. So this is not something that has an end in itself, but it's a constant state of development where we kind of think about what are the behaviors and the mindset. I think mindsets are not something that you have, it's something that you develop. And culture is also not something that you have, it's what you do. And I think how we behave and the code of our moral compass for how we define the behaviors that we are willing to accept or deploy becomes a real active part of the conversation, and that needs continuous refreshment. I think our organizations, or at least at Accenture, we exist to create value at the intersection of technology and human ingenuity. I think how we do that changes over time, and it is something that we're very focused on. And I think it is also part of the contribution to that value delivery. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this by using some comments for Peter Drucker. I think you'll remember his comment of culture is a strategy for breakfast, but he also said that the best way to predict the future is to actually shape it. And to me, and this is the thought that I would want to leave it with, is that we have a huge opportunity to shape the future of the intelligent age. And to me, that future is human. So I'll just leave you with that thought. Thank you very much.